economic warfare, political spin, clandestine operations, Unredacted with Rachel Marsden, lifting the black ink to reveal the covert information agents around global events. And now, here is your host, Rachel Marsden.
Hey, everybody, how you doing? It's Rachel here. Great show for you today. We're going to talk about Ukraine, of course, and influencers as well. Believe it or not, the two are linked. All right, how's everybody doing today? Coming to you live from Europe, the EUSSR, European Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, from the Underground Communications channel on YouTube that they haven't yet found or banned. It seems like that's all the rage these days. But for now, you can still hear me loud and clear. We're going to be joined today in about 13 minutes by Pepe Escobar, who is a long-time geopolitical expert specializing in Eurasia, Russia, China, the grand global chess game of geopolitics. He's written for the Asia Times. He's worked all over the world, and he will be joining us, I believe, from Istanbul, Turkey. So where he just so happens to be, but he comes through Europe every so often as well. So we will be talking to him about everything going on in Ukraine. He has a unique perspective on this because of his deep knowledge of Eurasia and Asia, and particularly with respect to the reorienting of the entire world order, I guess you could say, towards more of a strictly bipolar or multipolar entity as opposed to a US-dominated unipolar entity. I know it's really hard for you guys to ascertain what's going on out there. Some of you are following on social media the bouncing ball with respect to what's happening in Ukraine. You're seeing images that are maybe shocking, that you don't really understand, sometimes out of context. Sometimes you don't really know what to make of them. I think it's really important that we're really careful right now about evaluating the things that we see, which is why you don't see me throwing a lot of live images up on the screen, because we don't really know what it means out of context. We know there's a conflict. We know it's brutal. We know that there are refugees. We know that there are people suffering everywhere, including obviously Ukraine on the ground, but elsewhere as well. We know that sanctions are hitting Russian citizens who have, everybody's living, we in Europe are living in uncertainty as well. And it's really important to make sure that when we throw something up on a screen that we know exactly what it is and what it means before we start drawing conclusions. So that's why I haven't been doing much of that. However, I can tell you the grand strategy game around this conflict that is certainly being exploited. And I can certainly address the things that are being said and the mind games, manipulation, propaganda that we're seeing. And when I say that we're seeing, we only really have access to one side of this conflict. We have access to NATO and its proxy, which is essentially Ukraine. I mean, the NATO pushed Ukraine into this conflict. And Vladimir Zelensky yesterday in a CNN interview even flat out said, it was stunning. He flat out said that it was always understood that Ukraine would never be integrated into NATO, and the US flat out said that to him, but pushed him to keep pretending otherwise. Why would they do that? It's like, if you don't want a war in Ukraine, NATO, then stay out of it. Then stay away from Ukraine. Why was there's this big push to create a conflict with Russia right on its own border? That's the big mystery. I mean, I know it sells weapons, and I know that it serves certain interests, but it certainly does not serve the interests of the Ukrainian people. Anybody who thinks that the Ukrainian people have been well served as a result of NATO's strategy, are they well served? Do you see that things are working out well for them? Because that's where it's led to. So to that end, I also want to talk about the fact that the White House is trying really hard. And like I said, we don't really have much of the Russian side except through the mouths of officials in the West. And I'm not too keen on just strictly believing what they say about what's being said in Russia. So I have some insight into that. Pepe will have even more insight into that. But what we're primarily seeing in the West, and that's what I'm going to focus on because it's what's missing from the debate. Everybody's quick to judge the Russian side. Fair enough. This is a conflict and there are multiple parties involved. I think there is a lack of critical thought applied to the Western argument around this and the Western propaganda going on around this. So that's what I'd prefer to focus on at this point, because it's what I can verify and what I hear and see. So one thing we know is that Jen Psaki gave a big speech on, the press secretary at the White House gave a big speech on gas prices and why they're going up. We're going to get to that in a second. I'm going to play you a video. Hopefully I'll be able to try something new on the screen here and not screw it up. I'm going to share my screen with you. We're going to watch our video together. I'm going to comment on it. Washington also turned to TikTok influencers to promote its own narrative on Ukraine. They took a bunch of people who normally are known for duck face selfies and fashion statements and editing themselves, twirling around and dancing, and they're getting them to comment on gas prices. And one such person was a fashion blogger. They invited 30 people via Zoom to interact with national security officials at the White House and Jen Psaki. And one such person is right here. I don't have her name in front of me. I don't even know these people. Where is it here? I will find 18-year-old fashion influencer from California. She's called Ellie Zeiler. Fashion influencer from California, 18 years old. And here's what she has to say about gas prices after the White House encouraged them to speak to their many followers, who I'm sure are thrilled to get their geopolitical advice from TikTok influencers, propagandized or deputized to spew propaganda by the White House. Here it is. This is what she said.
Why is gas so expensive, and why is the United States inflation rate at a 4-time decade high? I had the opportunity to ask the White House why gas down the street is $7, and here's what they said. The obvious reason: we are getting out of a 2-year pandemic. When use goes up, price goes up. But the call was predominantly about Ukraine and Russia, so how does that relate? Russia is one of the top 3 producers of oil, and it is actually their #1 revenue source. Now, with Putin starting this horrific fight between Ukraine and Russia, nobody wants to work with him and do international trade. So, with people being scared of war and limited resources, prices are bound to go up as well. For the people who can't pay $7 for a gallon of gas, there's an app called Gas Buddy that shows you the cheapest gas near you, as well as a link in my bio to donate to the misplaced refugees of Ukraine.
Wonderful. Thanks for my nonsense. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, it certainly has, the price of gas has absolutely everything to do with the fact that nobody wants to do business with Ukraine, nobody wants to do business with Putin because he's bad guys who started a war in Ukraine. I mean, hello, Europe is still importing gas from Russia because it has no choice. There's no infrastructure to allow for any alternative. So they're looking maybe at way down the road, several years from now, as perhaps an alternative. But for now, even the people at the European Commission, Vice President of the European Commission, is saying we have no choice. So yeah, and it certainly has nothing to do with the fact that the United States has gone crazy and harassing the the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that was supposed to transport gas from Germany into Russia, is now sanctioned to death, to the point where nothing can flow through it. And gas, don't forget, it does have to do, even though we're talking about natural gas, it does have to have a relationship with the gas in your car, because that gas is from Russia, and to a lesser extent Norway and Algeria. That gas is used to produce ethanol. It's used in the production of ethanol that is then integrated into your fuel for your car. So I mean, the price of all that has gone up because there are fewer sources, because again, the US has blocked Russia at every turn. Oh no, but it has nothing to do with any of that. It has nothing to do with Biden deciding to kill Keystone XL pipeline with Canada that would have ensured North American energy independence. Nothing to do with that, right? It has everything to do with Putin being a bad guy. Yeah. I'm gonna go to my guest, who I see is now online, and afterwards, stay with us, because I'm gonna what Jen Psaki flat out told the American people. You can decide for yourself what you think of it. So, all right, now I'm gonna go to my guest. He is online. I see. Yeah. Okay. Gonna make sure that we're all connected here. Yeah. All right, Pepe Escobar, how you doing?
Hey, salam alaikum.
I'm just trying to make sure. I always have an issue with this microphone here. Let me just plug it in. Hang on. Oh yeah, okay. Sorry guys. All right, Pepe Escobar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. It's all good. All right, so I was just talking about all this.
Well,
all
let
the
me
wonderful
let me
news.
send my greetings from
Yeah.
Istanbul to everybody. Come on, it's 8
Yeah,
o'clock.
I was people that you're.
Yeah, it's 8
I was
o'clock,
telling
and
people you're probably still there.
I am 50 meters away from the Blue Mosque, and 100 meters away from the Sea of Marmara. So this is a very special place, you know.
Oh, can we see it from there or not? Can you
No,
Can you
we
actually
can't,
see it out your
because
window?
no, I am at an old Ottoman house, and my
Mhm.
windows are completely shut, you know, unfortunately.
Oh, maybe they can upgrade you between now and tomorrow. You can have that stellar view. But I was just telling folks that, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a privilege to have you on my
Thank
shows,
you.
and either in French or English, or I know you speak many more languages than I do. So I've seen you. If you want to see Pepe Escobar on YouTube, you can hear him in like Spanish, Portuguese, English, French, pretty much everything. You're the kind of like the global expert on globalization, and you have contacts, as I was saying, pretty much all over the world. And I was also mentioning that it's really interesting to speak with you on this particular issue with respect to the conflict in Ukraine, because you have access to so many contacts in Eurasia, and
Yeah,
your sources are really well placed. And this conflict what we're hearing, as I was saying to the audience just before you joined us, is we're hearing one side of the story, because like my show, like other programs, like other news, we are blocked, we are censored. I
of
have this
course,
show, but I
of
had
course.
another independent show hosted, licensed by a Russian state network that's now gone. It's suppressed. So so we're
So
not
your
hearing.
show in Paris is canceled for the moment, right?
Well, yeah, because there's no platform to broadcast it, and they bought exclusive. They bought the exclusive, even though it's independently produced. I mean, I produce
Yes,
it independently, and then it's licensed to Sputnik, and Sputnik, for the time being, is not allowed to broadcast. But they did specify. It's interesting. They said, but everybody who appeared on that platform still has the right to work. It's like, well, that's great, but we had an exclusive contract, or like the company that I work for the production company had an exclusive contract to license to Sputnik. So now that contract is up in the air, I mean, it's not like I can just take it and give it to somebody else that quickly, right?
Yeah.
So we're all living in this kind of no man's land right now with respect to information and communication. And what I've noted is that all we really have out there right now for people who are just passively consuming information that's available to them and not using VPNs to try to find these things actively, they're getting one side of the story, and it's the Western story. You have access to in the East, and have access to that narrative to just a really great extent. So I wanted to hear from you, like, what is the most striking for you right now? Because I know this is a very fast-moving story. It's evolving really quickly, right? But what's right now? What's striking you the most? What do you notice?
Rachel, wow, I could spend a whole day talking about really, because this is the most important geopolitical and geoeconomic story of the 21st century, hands down. Everything that happened for the past 20 years was a prelude to what's happening now, because many of us knew this thing would come to a head sooner or later. All of us, we thought it would be later, and later will be 2025, 2030, and it's happening now. It was absolutely inevitable. If you see, in fact, what happened for the past 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union, the 90s, and how Russia in the 90s was plundered, raped, destroyed by shock doctrine and all those people that we know very well.
Well, when you say shock doctrine, you mean that the Americans who were sent over there tried to help them?
Of course, the Jeffrey Sachs style disaster capitalism. This I remember because I went to Russia in the beginning of the 90s, in the mid 90s, a few days before the ruble crisis in 98, and at the end of the 90s. So every time that I visited, I had a pretty good grip of what was going on in that decade. And when Putin was elected president, I was there as well. I was 1 month in Moscow in March 2000. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So it was great because I had a ringside seat all these years on the transformations of Russia. But we could never imagine that the transformation that he would launch in 2000, by 2007 was already accelerated to the point that he could go to the Munich Security Conference and have that absolutely groundbreaking speech saying that the unipolar world can't stand anymore. And it's not only.
And that was 7 years in.
Exactly. It's the global south. At the time, nobody used the expression global south, but he meant the global south, the former third world, can't stand it anymore. And of course,
and then there was BRICS.
Nobody paid attention. You remember that? Nobody paid attention.
But then there was the BRICS group of countries. That
exactly. And then the BRICS
Brazil, India,
pick up steam.
China and South Africa.
And in the beginning, only BRIC before South Africa was incorporated. And that's something that's a story that I followed very closely. When Lula was president of Brazil, in fact, Lula had a very, very close relationship with Hu Jintao when he was president of China, and with Putin as well. And later,
he may be back, and Lula may be back in power.
Yes, but that's another.
That's a whole other issue. Yeah, I mean, we may be back, coming full circle here.
But coming back to the 2000s, it's very important to set the context. It's part of the essential context of what's going on now. Within the BRICS, by 2007, 2008, 2009 especially, they already started to discuss at the highest level how to bypass the US dollar. This was something that was very close to Putin, to Lula, and to Hu Jintao. So these three, not so much the Indians and the South Africans, So, the building blocks to what's happening now in terms of geoeconomics, we have to go back 15 years at least, So this is very, very important. In the 2010s, of course, we had especially I would say, the breakthrough which was made done in 2014, when the Americans thought that they could get away with doing something that they had been dreaming since forever, which is to separate Ukraine from Russia. If we go back to the 1,000 years of history of Russia, you see that on and off, Russians and Ukrainians are more or less the same people, or at least cousins. Like Russia, when it was built as a state 1,000 years ago, started in Kievan Rus. Kievan Rus. So this means that Russia, as the beginning, was not an empire at the time, of course, is intimately linked to that region of central Ukraine, which we can say is the Ukraine that should be on a map nowadays. Because the Ukraine that we see nowadays was a series of annexations by Catherine the Great, by Stalin. Before that, but not by Lenin, because Lenin was very sick in 1922. People around Lenin in 1922, then Stalin, and then Khrushchev in 54 when he annexed Crimea. So this is a Ukraine that doesn't exist. The heart of Ukraine is the region around Kiev. It's a sort of central Ukraine, which would correspond nowadays to something like 30% of the territory of the Ukraine that is being now fragmented again, because this war, the way it's taking place now, is about the fragmentation of Ukraine back to the east, southeast, and part of the center of Ukraine is not going to be Ukraine anymore. It's going to be what was historically called Novorossiya, part of Russia, in the borderlands of Russia, just like the region in the north and a little bit of northwest is called Malorossiya. It's also a part of the Russian borderlands. So when we look at the map and the way the progression of the maps every day of what the Russian armed forces are doing, they are basically reconquering Malorossiya and Novorossiya. What's going to be the status?
But they don't say that.
I have no idea, because this is an immensely complicated geopolitical problem.
But that's not what they're saying. Right. But when we listen to the Russian officials speak, they say, the Russian officials, they are saying that they're doing a special operation to denazify and
of course they cannot say that
and to disarm.
Rachel.
Right?
No, they cannot say that, Rachel, because this is one of the aspects. This is our many of us political analysis of where this is going. Of course, from a geopolitical point of view, the Russians cannot say outright that this is what they want. In fact, they are not even considering an annexation. What they would love is that Novorossiya would be maybe a series of, or probably a larger independent republic close to Russia. And then the rest of Ukraine to the west, Russia has absolutely no interest, because this is not a Russophone area of Ukraine. The Russophone area of Ukraine is the east, southeast, and northeast. Malorossiya and Novorossiya. So
right, but do you think that this would have happened if it wasn't for the tensions between NATO and Western countries within Ukraine and Russia?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the main reason for this, it's not, by the way, it's not a war. All that bullshit that I for professional reasons, I need at least to read the headlines in many languages of all of NATO's, what I call NATO stan. This means Canada, US, and most important European.
So when you say it's not a war, it's an armed conflict.
No, the best definition is by Andrei Martyanov, the military analyst. He's part of our network of analysts as well. Martyanov calls it a combined arms police operation. And that's what it is. Why it's a police operation? This is the denazification part of Putin has been detailing this since the beginning. Not only Putin, but Lavrov, Ryabkov, everybody in the Russian foreign ministry. And there's the
people have a hard time.
Wait, just a second.
The
militarization angle. There are two main angles of the operation. denazification and demilitarization. Demilitarization because neo-Nazis of all strands, and this means heirs to Steven Bandera, which was the great Nazi, totally hero at the time of the Second World War. And this guy is not even Ukrainian. You know where he was born, Rachel? In the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So he was not even Ukrainian. He was born in Galicia, which was part of Poland. This guy's not even Ukrainian. But Ukrainians recovered a Bandera as Ukrainians in the west of Ukraine as a myth, as one of their founding fathers. And he's an absolute Nazi. And the historical record proves it. Obviously, Western media doesn't go for it. So this narrative is completely obliterated from Western public opinion. So the fact that the National Guard in Ukraine is completely infiltrated, if not totally controlled, by all sorts of neo-Nazis. You can call them Nazis, neo-Nazis, Banderistas, Azov, Aidar group, whatever, And don't forget that, for instance, these groups, these neo-Nazi groups like Azov and Aidar, they were founded and weaponized by Ukrainian oligarchs, especially Kolomoisky. You know who is Kolomoisky? The guy who invented Zelensky. Zelensky was a nulity who was basically a bad actor. And because he was supported from the beginning by Kolomoisky, he had his own TV show. He made a lot of money for Kolomoisky on TV, especially. and the craziest thing in terms of meta-narrative, he was playing a president on Ukrainian TV, and then he became a president. The actor became so this is the meta.
And he beat Poroshenko, who was kind of the Western favorite.
Poroshenko was even worse because Poroshenko was a Nazi. Poroshenko was a Nazi in a pinstriped suit, essentially, which is the perfect Nazi for Anglo-American elites. The respectable, the presentable Nazi. So when he ruled, he was doing the same thing, if not worse than Zelensky. He was ruling side by side with the neo-Nazi groups. He facilitated this takeover of the National Guard, especially by the Azov battalion. And with Zelensky, it's the same thing, but the difference is that Zelensky is a hostage of the neo-Nazis. It's not that he is per se a neo-Nazi as hardcore as Poroshenko, but he's a hostage.
Yeah, I mean,
if he says, "Look, I'm going to negotiate with the Russians," he gets a bullet in his head the same day, Ray. This is also something that you won't see in Western media.
Yeah, I mean, there's something I want to bring into the conversation here, because I was telling the audience before you came on that there was a CNN interview that aired yesterday where Zelensky actually said to the camera that he was told that by the Americans that Ukraine would never join NATO, but he was told to keep pretending otherwise publicly.
Exactly. Now, everybody knew that from the beginning.
What would be the rationale behind the Americans and NATO getting Zelensky to keep peddling this myth that he's going to join NATO and to throw that in Russia's face?
This is a diversionist tactic, and this is a narrative sold to American public opinion and Western public opinion. Everybody in Brussels, when you talk to diplomats in Brussels, not with journalists, diplomats who work in Brussels, European Union, they tell you straight away, we would never admit that black hole inside the European Union because we're going to have to pay for it with money that we don't have. The same thing with Georgia. And Ukraine is much, much worse because it's an absolute black hole. It's being, in fact, Ukraine survives because of IMF loans, which they will never be able to repay, in fact. So everybody knows that. The Americans, of course, they never said it. So there was this fiction that, the discussions in Brussels, the possibility of Georgia, and this has been going on since 2008. It's not since yesterday. This myth that Georgia and Ukraine will have conversations and negotiations for their adhesion to the European Union and NATO, this has been going on since 2008. So
nothing's happening, but why? So why are they pushing this then? I mean, what is the goal of NATO? I mean, is it just to sell weapons? Is it just to antagonize Russia? NATO?
No,
Why are they pushing this?
Rachel, it's much more complicated, and I wish I
I'm
had
sure it is.
the appropriate time to explain the details. Unfortunately, we don't, and that's my frustration in every podcast, because
I'll give you all the time you want.
Exactly, I
Keep
will
going,
need 2
Pepe.
or
I'll give
3
you all the
hours
time
to
you
get
want.
into the details. And if you don't explain what's been happening inside Washington, inside Brussels, inside Moscow, and in Kiev for the past, at least since 2014, it's impossible to understand what's going on now. For instance, nobody, in terms of Western public opinion, knows what happened in Donbass since 2014.
Well, it's
And
nonstop low-level shelling.
Exactly, because this has been completely erased from the Western narrative. Right. I'm one of the very, very few Western journalists who actually been to Donbass. I was there in early 2015, and I saw everything that you're seeing now of course, in a minuscule framework. I saw bombings of civilians. I talked to people living in bomb shelters. We went to a neighborhood near the airport, which was about 3 kilometers from the airport. We heard the bombing practically non-stop and the shelling practically non-stop, and they refused to take us to the airport because they were afraid that we would be shelled. So how many Western journalists did that? Zero. We were a group of independents. I had Serbians with me. There was an American with us, James Carden, was the only other Western journalist. Everybody else was from, Malaysia, Russians, Serbs, Slovenians, etc. So we managed to see that in the beginning. Later on, a few independents who are basically on the net also saw exactly the same thing. So at least we can tell audiences in the West what it feels like. And what it feels like for the past 8 years. And this is something that there is a very, very serious discussion inside Russia. Why the Russians didn't do this before? Save the population, the Russophone population in Donbass from being, Putin calls it a genocide because 14,000 people were killed. It's debatable in terms of terminology, but it is a mini genocide when we're talking about 14,000 people killed. And if we compare to Yemen, Yemen is a mega genocide because Yemen is 300,000 people killed by the Saudi Arabian war, which is
we don't talk about
weaponized. But
nobody
in the West talks about the actual genocide in Yemen perpetrated with American, Brit, and European weapons. Completely disappeared. We have a bunch of crazy Houthis who smoke stuff and start bombing people. This is the narrative in the West. So just like during Syria, over 10 years in Syria, what narrative did we have? Assad is bombing his own people. But there was no media going to see what the civilian population of Syria had to do to fight the moderate rebels, Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda in Syria in its different denominations. Turks supported and weaponized different kind of jihadis from all over the world who were working for Daesh and employed by Daesh with cash and weapons. Nothing. So in the case of Donbass as well, it's easy to brainwash Western public opinion because for everybody, the civilian population of Donbass doesn't exist. Civilians in Donetsk, civilians in Luhansk being bombed and shelled every day by the Ukrainian forces, including Azov Battalion and other neo-Nazis, they don't exist. Can you believe it, Rachel? When I entered Twitter only 6 months ago, you know that the first post that Twitter censored is because I wrote exactly that. The civilian populations in Donbass don't exist for the West. They blocked my tweet. So this is
it's true because how many people honestly have heard about that? I mean, that's not an opinion. It's fact.
That's what I'm saying. It's a fact. Yeah. It's a fact.
Ask people around you.
Exactly. If you ask any relatively well-informed reader in the West, virtually nobody in the US. I can bet a bottle of Moet Chandon with you that nobody knows about civilian population in Donbass being shelled for 8 years. Nobody. So it's very easy to brainwash everybody. Putin is the new Hitler. He's crazy. He's insane. He started a war out of nowhere. And that in a sense
the
is
impression.
the Western narrative in NATO's stand. But NATO's stand is not the world.
Right.
NATO's stand is less than 30% of the world. Here, where I am in Turkey, which is trying to play a balancing act, in fact, and I would, of course, I am not an Erdoganist by all means, but their foreign policy at the moment is very sophisticated because they are the only NATO country that is trying to work towards some sort of agreement between Russia and Ukraine. Congratulations to
They're very good at that.
They're very, very good at that.
Syria and Libya, they
very serious.
Kind of
because they have close relationships with both. They simply cannot afford to antagonize Russia because of nuclear power plants, because they buy Russian gas, because of tourism, which Russian tourists spend a fortune here in Turkey every year. So there are many reasons. And at the same time, they're very close with Ukraine. They sell Bayraktar drones. They have military agreements. The same. They consider Ukraine part of what the pure Kafka organization they have here called Organization of Turkic States. I went to visit them and I had an extremely surrealist dialogue with them because they couldn't tell me exactly what they do. It was very, very, very funny. I was trying to what
they
is
probably don't know what they do.
Exactly, because they don't even know what is their agenda in the end. So, but at least Turkey is the only country in NATO who's trying to do something. And don't forget, 70% of the world's population in terms of nations did not sanction and did not antagonize Russia. So what we have all
AKA
the heavyweights
the entire
in Eurasia.
world.
China, India, Iran, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, all and Turkey as well, which is between East and West because they still don't know where they're leading. So Africa and Latin America. So
So when they want to, so when they want to isolate Russia, and Russia says, but when
it's NATO against the world again, Rachel. So
when the West says that they want to isolate Russia, and Russia says there are other options here, what is now? What do you think is going to happen? Is Russia going to be sued?
No,
because that's kind of the impression we have in Europe. Aside from the fact that we're kind of screwed actually in Europe.
No.
Frankly, because we screwed ourselves out of all sorts of business relationships.
It's already happening, Rachel. In my, I would say three latest columns, I get into painstaking detail about it in terms of how Russia and China, especially, and the Eurasian Economic Union, which is led by Russia, but it has also Kazakhstan, which is very powerful, Belarus, Kyrgyzstan, and Armenia. With China, together, they are starting to design a new monetary financial system. The draft paper will be ready by the end of this month. This means in 2 weeks, they're going to have the first draft. This is going to be at the highest level because if it is a common negotiation between the Eurasia Economic Union and China, this means Russia and China negotiating at the highest level to build a sort of not Bretton Woods 3, but a post-Bretton Woods system, which is going to be backed by what? By gold, and with a currency that is going to be what? The internationalized yuan. So this is the high stakes game over there that once again, no discussion whatsoever in Western media, apart some, 2 or 3 people on zero hedge, bankers especially, they know that this is happening and they have to report about it, But you don't see that.
Now, do you think they were ready for this? Like, has this been in the works for a long time, or did Russia just
no? It's been in the works. In the shade, in the background, yes, a long time. And coming back to the beginning of our conversation, since Lula, Hu Jintao, and Putin were discussing, okay, what are you going to do to bypass the dollar? So this has been in the background for over 15 years. And now, finally, we have I would say, the astral conjunction necessary to have the ball rolling very, very fast. And this is what happened.
But why didn't they do it before? Why did they wait? Why
Uh,
didn't they do it
be-
before?
oh my God, this is another 1 hour answer. I cannot give you Hollywood answers, Rachel.
I have a
Really.
tendency of asking.
It's too complex to, and I hate Hollywood answers. I hate it. Even though I lived in Hollywood, I know how to do it, but I don't like it. You have to get into the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter is China was basically building their strategic with Russia. It took years. Russia was basically thinking, okay, we're going to have to do a sort of pivot to Asia, but in which terms? So China has the new Silk Roads, which is their overarching foreign policy directive for the rest of the century, in fact, which is connectivity all across Eurasia, uniting China with Eurasia and hopefully with Europe as well. And Russia came up with their own concept, which is called officially Greater Eurasia Partnership, which is more or less the same thing, but without the financial firepower that the Chinese have. So Russia has the natural resources and now is the #1 military power on the planet, hands down. China is the most important trading nation on the planet, and it's already by PPP the #1 economy in the world. So in terms of strategic partnership, it's perfect because they're complementary.
Yeah.
So they spent all these many years that you just referred to, they spent these, I would say, this past 7 or 8 years at least, discussing, okay, how are we going to organize our partnership? What are we going to attack first? How are we going to merge our two different projects? How are we going to have investments that are complementary in different areas of Asia, in Siberia, for example, in Southeast Asia, where they're both very close. For instance, the Eurasia Economic Union, they have trade agreements with Southeast Asian nations. And at the same time, China is the most important trade partner of all Southeast Asian nations. So they have to get together, sit on the same on the same table to discuss all that. And they do it, Rachel, in many different venues. Inside the BRICS, in their bilaterals, which happen all the time, phone calls, Putin, Xi, it's crazy. Putin, Xi, they talk on the phone literally every month. Seriously, you know. Within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is now a very, very important body because now Iran is becoming part of it. So now you have on the same economic cooperation as well, anti-terrorism, security organization, you have Russia, China, the Central Asian states, India, Pakistan, and Iran. So all except Turkey. Turkey is an observer, and they're still thinking because they're East and West. Okay, what do we do next? And obviously, Turkey is little by little following what the flow of history. In fact, they are looking at Eurasia as their future, and not Europe, because Turkey for the Europeans, and that was always the case. Is that thing
they were never going to be allowed into the EU.
No, they will never be allowed to become a EU member. And they knew
that's been a topic of discussion for decades. Yeah.
For decades, exactly. They tried everything you can imagine, by the book and off the books. And a few years ago, especially after that failed coup against Erdogan in 2016, they said, no, it's not going to happen. Especially because the coup came from NATO.
Well, we know that
who told
it was in the
them that
staging area.
No,
in Sterlik Air Base or something. I think it was run out of.
No, it came from Incirlik.
The air base, the NATO air base.
They came from Incirlik. Everybody here in Istanbul knows the story. Everybody knows the story. And who picked up the phone to call Erdogan and Turkish military intelligence, MIT, at the time to say, look, they're coming after you, Russian intelligence, and Vladimir Putin. So this is something that here they will never forget. It's also at the highest level. So obviously they cannot betray Russia. Now they're trying to find, within their limits. At least it's a very laudable effort. Okay, let's try. But the problem is, for instance, today we learned from the really important strong man here in Turkey is not the foreign minister, Cavusoglu. is Erdogan's personal spokesman, Ibrahim Kalin. Ibrahim Kalin is the Grand Vizier. You know, remember the Grand Vizier during the Ottoman Empire? So the Grand Vizier is Kalin. He said that, yes, they are discussing 6 points because he's following both Russia and Ukrainians, and he talks to both. The problem is the Americans are going to veto all these 6 points, which include neutrality and a promise never to enter NATO and denazification.
So then what? So then what?
What?
That's what I was asking myself. What happens after that? If Zelensky is running interference between the White House and his own people, and he knows the Americans are going to veto all these points, then where do they end up? Where does this end up? How does this end, this conflict?
No, it's not a question of we don't know how it's going to end.
No kidding.
Because
I certainly don't.
No, I know, Rachel. It's better to be absolutely honest, right?
Yeah.
With all of you who are listening. Because the Americans only have one plan. Plan A for the Americans is chaos. Plan A for the Americans is a remix of the 1980s jihad, now with Nazis inside Ukraine to, so that Russia will be bogged down just like they were in 1980s in Afghanistan. They are not very imaginative because the CIA is not exactly high IQ. These guys are by the book all the time, and they only, as you know very well, I don't have to explain it to you, they only have one plan all over the world. Okay, we create
disruption,
urban chaos, and urban chaos,
to
and we watch,
overthrow the
and we are on the
government.
sidelines. We are on the sidelines watching, and we always have a plausible deniability. That's the only thing that they know how to do. You know. So, and obviously the Russians know this shit, from A to Z.
But some people would say that the Russians, played into their hands, though, by
No, because people who say that, first of all, don't know shit about Russia and Ukraine. I'm sorry to be so explicit. Nobody, none of us, even independents, could imagine that Operation Z would be such a large-scale operation as it is now. Why? There are 3 main reasons, and we only became aware of these 3 main reasons a few days after the beginning of Operation Z. Reason number 1, and it's a matter of, in terms of dates, it varies between 1 week to 2 or 3 weeks. These are corroborated by documents that they apprehended in Ukraine after the beginning of Operation Z, and information by the SVR, Russian Foreign Intelligence. The Ukrainians were ready to launch a blitzkrieg from hell over Donbass. So they were going to go all in and probably kill a lot of civilians. And these are, don't forget, many of them have Russian passports. They are not only Russophones, but they are Russian citizens. So Russia could never allow something like this to happen. This is reason number
and in fact,
one.
that's what Putin cited himself in his speech.
Exactly. Yeah. Putin said that in his speech and his later speeches over and over and over again. So this was the most important reason, let's put it this way. But there are other reasons that are absolutely essential. One of them was the biolabs, or the bioweapon labs, which the Russians, once again, as soon as they got inside Ukraine, they found all sorts of documents, and some of these documents were handed over to them by the people working in the labs. It was not under coercion or something like that, So there was a Pentagon-financed, extremely well-organized bioweapons program in many labs across Ukraine. This is already
just quickly
proved.
Yes. Can I just quickly read to the audience, because this is kind of important.
Yes, go ahead. Go.
Putin's
this is very important.
Because they don't get. It's really rare for the audience to have access to things that the president of Russia says, even though they are definitely in this conflict. So Putin said in a speech last week, he said, and I'm quoting him to translate it from, there was a network of dozens of stories in Ukraine where military biological programs were conducted under the Pentagon. Experiments with coronavirus, anthrax, cholera, African swine fever, and deadly diseases. And he added that, quote unquote, are underway to conceal the quote unquote traces of the programs. I'm sure that surprised a lot of people, but there are others saying, oh no, that's not bioweapons, it's just bio research. Well, what's really the difference? Once you're inside the lab, it's classified. Exactly. You can print anything you want, right?
Rachel, now they have documents that they translated from Ukrainian to Russian and to English that they presented at the UN. You know, Nebensia, the Russian ambassador at the UN, presented these documents at the UN. Obviously, we know that nothing's going to happen because the UN is absolutely controlled by the Americans. But now this is public domain. It's all over in Russian Telegram channels. You have copies of these documents, etc. And this is only some of the stuff that the Russian Ministry of Defense released. So this was the second reason, very important. So the first reason, an imminent genocide of Donbass. Second reason, the biolabs. And the third reason basically comes back to the absence of response, I would say response, to the letters that the Russians sent to the Americans in December, where the key was indivisibility of security. The Russians were not asking for anything absurd. They were asking for something that is absolutely obvious in terms of international diplomacy. Indivisibility of security of all of the members of the Atlantic space. But there is a direct connection to that, which is the fact that Zelensky himself, on the weekend before, in fact, at the Munich Security Conference, the weekend before the beginning of Operation Z, openly said that Ukraine was considering ditching the Budapest agreements of 1994 and go for nuclear weapons. For Russia, this was not a red line. This was a 10 million galactic crimson line.
Yeah, but again, why is he doing that? Why is he doing that? Like, why is Zelensky being so reckless?
First of all, because he's an idiot clown on coke. So you say that these things when you are on coke. All of us who knows.
Unless we've been in the room with the guy. I hope you mean the soda.
Exactly.
I hope you mean the soda.
Yeah, no, but it's absolutely ridiculous.
We've been in the room with a guy. We don't know.
No, but to say that in public in an international conference, and obviously those bloody idiots, Germans, Dutch, Canadians who were there, you know, they applauded like a bunch of fucking idiots. And the Russians said, "What? Nuclear weapons?" Okay, so
well,
now
he's calling for no-fly zones, and they're applauding.
Exactly. So we have our trifecta of motives. So from the Russian point of view, this was more than enough, and especially because they had already warned the Americans, look, if you don't answer to our letters, or at least with an adult answer, which they refused to answer, of course, and if you don't respect the principle of indivisibility of security, and if you don't assure us that you won't stop expanding NATO to outer space, and NATO is not expanding only to Russian borders. NATO is literally going to space. It's there. It's there. It's in the NATO 2030 program. If you read it, it's over there as well. Latin America, Africa, borders of Russia, outer space, you name it.
And Mars.
And Mars, whatever.
And Saturn.
So the Russians said, okay, so we warned you guys. You didn't answer. Okay. And from the beginning, don't forget that since December, the Russians are saying, we're going to apply our own technical military matters. This is the official terminology. This is what we're seeing now in Ukraine. The application of technical military response in this very complex police operation, combined arms, etc., which the fascinating thing about the campaign, I was discussing this with military analysts. They are fascinated by the fact that the strategic ambiguity of the whole thing. Nobody can pinpoint what's going to be the next Russian move? Where? What does it mean to have a column of tanks immobilized north of Kiev for 2 weeks without moving? And nobody
Right, and
knows what they're
that's
going to do.
why, and that's why what we're hearing, what we're reading in the press is people are just drawing conclusions and saying it means that the Russians are stuck.
But this is only
right? That's what you're reading too, right? That's what I'm reading. The Russians are, it's a stalemate.
Well,
That's what
I
we're
don't
reading.
waste my time reading this shit anymore, Rachel, because I have more important things to do. I just see what Martyanov is saying, and Martyanov, with his inimitable sense of humor, he's laughing about all these clowns. So he says, look, they have degrees in humanities. What the fuck do they know about war?
Well, last week they were before this they were experts on health, public policy, and things like that.
They're
Vaccination.
experts in health, in transgender studies, or whatever. What do they know about hardcore war?
Yeah.
So and it's fascinating because the Russians, it is slow. For instance, a lot of very good Russian military analysts, some of them are complaining that the whole thing is too slow, but it's on purpose. Because there's no point in doing nothing at the moment, because the overall strategy is not to occupy cities or bomb cities. It's to encircle them. What's going to happen inside these cities is another story. For instance, the best example is Mariupol. Mariupol basically is a Novorossiya city, pro-Russian. Over 90% is absolutely pro-Russian. It should have been part of the baby twins, as I call the Donetsk Lugansk from the beginning. But because of what happened in 2014, they were not, because the Nazis got there first. So what is the problem now? The city is completely encircled. The Nazis are entrenched inside the city in hospitals, kindergartens, you name it. They are using the civilian population as human shields. So this means that the conquest of Mariupol is going to have to be house to house, which is exactly what the Russians didn't want from the beginning. But it's going to have to be like, there's no other way to extricate or eliminate or decapitate these people. And the Chechens are, they are very much focused on Mariupol, because they want to go there and kill everybody. Kill everybody means kill all the Nazis. And the Chechens, Spetsnaz, are very good at that kind of shit, So it's complicated. It takes time. Kiev, they don't want to. What's the point of occupying Kiev? Nothing. It's different. They are encircling all the routes that Ukrainian armed forces would have to retreat and regroup. For instance, I'll give you the biggest example so far, which is the cauldron, or the mini cauldrons on the Ukrainian side of the line of contact between Ukraine and the two Donbass republics. These guys are completely encircled. The last time I checked, which was yesterday, there were 3 different cauldrons, a big cauldron and 3 mini cauldrons. They cannot escape it. There are only 2. And the Russians already said, look, if you give up your arms, we'll give you safe passage and you can go back, see your families, etc. If there is no, if you don't surrender, you know what's going to happen. So it's, and the decision comes from Kiev. What do we have these past 24 hours? Kiev, they're saying, no, nobody's going to surrender. So this means they're going to get killed. They're going to get killed. It's simple as that. They're going to get killed by those. I would say this is the weapon from hell. Those thermobaric Buratino rockets, thermobaric. They create.
Yeah, and then everyone blames Russia, but
no. It's hell. It's worse than hell to die on a Buratino rocket. This is what's going to happen to them.
Now, does Putin have anything left to lose vis-a-vis the West?
No. No. It's not that Putin. It's the Russian leadership as a whole. Don't forget that the day before he launched Operation Z, early in the morning in Russia, I think it was 5 or 5:30 in the morning in Russia. The night before, he called the oligarchs to the Kremlin, all of them, everybody sitting down like school guys, and he said, look, something very important is going to happen, and I need to count on you. You're not going to go away. You're not going to close down your business, industry, etc. This is a national effort. Everybody has to participate, including you, with your zillions, billions, whatever, etc. So he warned the oligarchs that this is a collective Russian endeavor, because this is seen for them as an existential battle. And that's something that is absolutely impossible to make the West understand. Don't forget that the Soviet Union, Russia included, they lost 27 million people in World War II. Who won World War II? Was not Steven Spielberg, was not Normandy, all that shit.
Well,
It was the Red Army, period.
Yeah.
If the Red Army had not expelled the Nazis from the Soviet Union and went after them all the way to the Reichstag in Berlin, we would all be Heil Hitler by now. Everybody knows this. Everybody who knows European history knows that. Obviously, the Americans don't know European history because they don't know history, they don't know geography, they don't know shit. They know pop culture. That's a different story. I know. I lived in Hollywood, so come on.
Yeah.
I speak as a native as well. So for American public opinion, they can consume any version of history they want. But Russians, every Russian family has at least one member that was killed or maimed or wounded in this is something that when you start conversations with people in Russia, you see the extent. It's mind-boggling. So the war affected virtually every family. So the collective unconscious is very, very strong. So when you see a bunch of bloody Nazis bombing and shelling a Russophone population on their borders, on the borderlands of Russia, obviously. Why do you think the support in Russia now for the armed forces is 94%, and Putin's support is over 7%? The last we saw,
I saw it went up, and that was a Levada Center. I think that was a Levada Center poll.
The Levada Center poll, exactly.
They're pretty independent.
They are. No, the Levada poll is very serious. So and you see it. You see the at Luzhniki Stadium, the speech, Putin's speech commemorating the reintegration of Crimea to Russia. 100,000 people inside the stadium and 140,000 people around the stadium. Can you have crash test dummy in a parking lot in America do the same thing?
Joe Biden, you mean? Joe Biden? He's crash test dummy?
Crash test dummy? Exactly. Okay, so, but obviously these things don't filter in the West, because as you said in the beginning, Rachel, the blitzkrieg, the psyops blitzkrieg on Westerners is 24/7, and it's absolutely massive. It's impossible.
And they're not hearing this. They're not hearing me. They're not hearing you, except the ones the people who are watching us right now and who will watch this show afterwards. I mean, but again, like I said, I mean, I'm censored on the platforms on which I have a voice.
Rachel, you, me, and independent analysts, we are a very tiny minority. In English, exactly. We have, and we at least we communicate in English. This means we can have reverberations across the world. If you're talking in Russian, nobody in the West will listen to you. Unfortunately, nobody. You are invisible. You're invisible. So there's only one side to the story, and in terms of information war. And it's correct. The Americans already won the information war in terms of brainwashing Western public opinion. But is this relevant to what's happening in Ukraine? No, it's totally irrelevant. What matters is the Russians are doing on the facts, on the famous facts on the ground in Ukraine.
And we're not getting a very good view of that right now. I mean, unless you know people who have connections on the ground, it's really hard to gauge what's going on. That's why I try to avoid showing images like that I haven't been able to analyze and contextualize on my show. Because there's so much information, misinformation, propaganda going on out there.
Misinformation. Of course.
I want to ask, we have Pepe, we have a lot of people watching right now, like a lot.
Wonderful.
And I
Excellent.
just, and I just wanted to let people know I'm reading all your comments. I'm throwing some of them up as they come in. If you have any specific questions for Pepe, would you be
Yes,
willing
of
to
course.
take some
I'll
questions
be
from
happy
him?
to answer them.
Okay,
Yes.
guys, get on that. If you have anything that you want to ask specifically, I will bring that up. But do you think this is going to be a long grind? Do you think we're looking at a long, drawn out
Well,
conflict?
yes, the repercussions, it's for the rest of the century, the repercussions. Facts on the ground.
Another 80 years? 80 years type of thing.
Yeah, years, if not decades, in terms of the
And
geopolitical and geoeconomic. For instance, in terms of
Yeah.
geoeconomic repercussions, if we have this new monetary financial system set up by the Eurasia Economic Union in China working, let's say, next year, this is the game-changing moment. If we have, for instance, Saudi Arabia really selling all the oil that they sell to China in yuan, this is another mega game-changing moment. If we have an alliance of all the major Eurasian countries in terms of let's going to be part of the new monetary financial system, because we simply cannot trust the Americans, and we cannot have our foreign reserves in US dollars because we know what's going to happen. It's exactly what happened with the Russians. And this is already a process. It's already ongoing, Rachel. It's already happening.
There's a question here. What are the chances will spread to Europe? NATO is involved with Europe. So
in fact, it's not the war in Europe. There will be strikes in Eastern Europe. That's for sure. We don't know when.
Strikes in Eastern Europe.
And I'll tell you exactly where.
But that'll pull NATO in. Right?
No, Romania and Poland. If the Americans don't disable their missile installations in Romania and Poland, they will be struck by the Russians sooner or later. I would say more later than sooner in this case, because their order of priorities is first we need to solve Ukraine. Then we're going to have to solve Eastern Europe. This is going to happen inevitably. And then, of course, it opens the possibility, horrifying
to World War III.
Of World War III, because then it's going to be an attack, a preemptive attack on two NATO countries. This is this is being gamed already, Rachel.
I'm sure everyone's gaming it.
Of
otherwise, they'd be negligent if they weren't.
But
what's this question?
But the craziest part, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just to finish this point, the craziest part is it would take one phone call from the people who actually run the show, obviously not in Kiev, obviously not in Brussels, in Washington, D.C., and say, okay, we agree that we're not going to have Ukraine as well, and we agree to stop the expansion NATO East.
Yeah.
That's all it takes. It's very, very simple. It's very simple.
Yeah.
And we know it's not going to happen.
Yeah. The question here, why are they activating? I'm just trying to read here. Oh no. I'm going to get back to the other one. Is there a possibility of the EU forming a backbone and addressing their energy concerns without Uncle Sam directing them?
No, because they don't. It's a very good question. No, because they don't have an independent foreign policy. It's an excellent question. And this is something that you only understand when you go to Brussels, when you talk to these people in the European Union, in the European Commission. You see how the EU mechanism works. They don't have sovereignty, Rachel. It's mind-boggling.
I know. I live here.
It took me years to adapt to it, and that's it. And it's not going to change. It's not going to change.
I know, and I know that Macron he's been saying throughout his entire mandate, which is up for renewal next month. He's been saying he wants to pivot more towards Russia, more cooperation, more cybersecurity, more economic cooperation. And France has a heck of a lot of interests in Russia, economically speaking. I mean, I think it's number one country.
Interest, exactly.
Yeah, and they're just willing to. Right now, they're saying, well, on one hand, Macron is saying we need to sacrifice all that. You, the little people, have to sacrifice. Turn your heating down and stop insuring maybe you should be eating lentils and right? But on the other hand, he's like, oh, by the way, companies in Russia, don't be so quick to leave. So
Rachel, it's very easy
a doublespeak happening here.
For these bloody bureaucrats in Brussels who have ridiculously fat salaries, paying no taxes, and when they and when they have their pensions, fat pensions with no taxes,
they don't really care
it's
much
very easy
about
to lecture,
the little guy.
the struggling average European. This is completely absurd.
Well, yeah, because you have an official car and they're paying your gas, and you don't really care. Here's the other question.
I have friends who retire as nabobs in Southeast Asia. Former European Commission officials.
I know.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, on Macron says all that, and he has his absolute idiot Bruno Le Maire, ministre des Finances. Okay, we just confiscated 22 billion euros from Russia. Nice, no?
Yeah. And when they're all for free markets, right? Here's another question. Why are they activating digital currencies all over the world now? That comes from Alexandra Alvarez. Why are they activating digital currencies? I'm not really in crypto and things like that. I know a lot of people already are, but it seems a lot of people might think it has to do with there's this harmonized global QR code that came out of the pandemic, and a lot of people think that it's a matter of attaching those two things together, maybe. I mean,
well, the problem is if central bank digital currencies, they can harmonize, but private digital wallets, no way. There will always be a way.
I know.
There will always be a way to escape it. But one of the planks of the Great Reset is central bank digital currency, controlled by central banks, which means controlled by who? The Bank of International Settlements, which is controlled by who? I just say the letter R for you, and you know who I mean. That's it.
Rothschild.
So
the Rothschilds, right?
No, don't say it. They're gonna strike a hellfire.
Don't say it.
Both of us.
So here's another question, Pepe. It's from Doug Fuska. Pepe, do you have any opinion why Putin has nominated for a third term Elvira Nabiullina as chief of the Russian Central Bank? Will Russia also sign the treaty, the World Health Organization treaty?
I know this is a conversation we are having for the past 2 or 3 days, and we are all puzzled. I confess to all of you, nobody can explain why he reappointed Elvira Nabiullina, non-Atlanticist, considered by many in Russia, many Russian patriots as a fifth colonist, very, very dangerous, as the head of the central bank again. The only explanation that which is our working hypothesis at the moment, is the kind of Putin judo. we're looking at it, but what's really happening, it's over there in the back, and nobody's paying attention. There's no.
Or maybe your friend's close and your enemy's closer, or maybe she's playing.
Exactly.
Maybe she has a different game going on here.
Exactly. But her game, Rachel, is Bank of International Settlements. Everything that central banks in the world do, Fed and company, and IMF. This is her game. Everybody knows her game in Russia and outside of Russia. So why put her back again? Because obviously there's got to be an indirect strategy that we still cannot see. And the way I see it, and I'm going to have maybe a confirmation within the next few days. The really important thing is what Sergei Glaziev at the Eurasia Economic Commission, which is the ruling body of the Eurasia Economic Union, is doing with the Chinese. That is, design this new monetary financial system. When this thing is ready and falls with a bang, who's going to pay attention to the Russian central bank? It's going to be a minor matter, because they're gonna have to rejig the whole system, including their own central bank. So this is a possible. Please take this as a working hypothesis. But we are discussing this thing frantically this past 2 or 3 days.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, everybody's trying to work this out. other people who might have other sources than they do. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do from where I am here in Paris. There's
Of
another
course.
question for you, Pepe. How do you think a functional state can be built back there, and under what border? I guess it's Mona Dennis. I think she's talking about Ukraine. If divided, how would they survive as enemy neighbors?
Exactly. A functioning state in Ukraine,
Yeah.
it depends on what is the ultimate political goal of the Russian leadership, which is very, very vague. They only said explicitly no neutrality, no Ukraine in NATO, denazification, which means getting rid of all the Pravi sector, Aidar, Azov battalion, neo-Nazi, proto-Nazi, soccer hooligans, whatever, all of that. By the way, did you know that the current head of the Azov battalion, do you know how he started, Rachel? As a soccer hooligan for the Dynamo Kiev club. Can you believe?
Is that where they recruit? That's where they recruit.
It's like, you have a guy who he's a soccer hooligan for Manchester United, and he became mega neo-Nazi militia in England. It's the same thing. It's completely absurd. It's completely absurd. So getting rid of all these people, but the Russians don't say what's going to be the final status of the baby twins plus other liberated areas. This means Novorossiya. Territories liberated in the north of Kiev, including northeast and north of Kiev. And very important, the fact that this new Ukraine won't have the Sea of Azov, which is already lost. They don't have access to the Sea of Azov anymore, and they may lose their access to the Black Sea as well. Because don't forget, very, very important, and everybody is looking at it carefully, when the play for Odessa is going to start. Is it going to be next week? Is it going to be in 1 month? Is it going to be later this year? Because there's going to be a play for Odessa. There's no question. Odessa is an absolute majority Russian-speaking city with very, very close ties to Russian culture and history. So, and if you go to Odessa, you go all the way to the rest of the Black Sea, and you get close to Transnistria, that territory that is pro-Russian. Splinter from Moldova, and then you close completely this new Ukraine to the Black Sea. It's going to happen. We don't know how long, but it's inevitable. So what's going to be left, which is a part of the answer to this excellent question, by the way. We're going to have a sort of a mini rump state in central Ukraine around Kiev. And what's going to very important, what's going to happen to Western Ukraine? Guess who wants to make a play to grab Western Ukraine? Poland. Do you know?
Really?
You know the hidden meaning of Poland wanting to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine is because they're going to have troops around Lviv in the northwest and in the west. There's Lviv, okay. But in the west, there's nothing. The important area is Lviv and surround. So they can grab this from the future amputated Ukraine for Poland, because these were historically Polish territories. So what we're seeing, you see how we're seeing a complete reconfiguration of the Ukrainian map in front of us, in fact.
Right, and now when you talk
a long time, which can take a long time.
Yeah, but when you talk about Poland, I mean, we also automatically invokes NATO, and Vladimir Zaitsev has an interesting question here. I think it relates to that tangentially. What is the likelihood of a preemptive nuclear strike or a preemptive nuclear attack initiated by American elites who cannot deal with the consequences of the collapse of the unipolar moment?
Exactly.
They seem utterly rabid. In other words, preemptive a strike by NATO.
It's a very good question,
that's what it is.
Especially because they are rabid at the moment. And don't forget that in a history, it's a detail that decides big geopolitical events. It's usually very small details. No? So let's suppose we have not a direct order from the president, which doesn't even know the way to the toilet, but somebody in the somebody in the Biden combo with his neocon Pentagon connections, and they come to a situation where somebody can press the button. Of course, this means World War III, because the Russian counterstrike is going to be absolutely devastating. And the Americans won't even see it, because the Russian counterstrike is going to be by Mr. Zircon. Mach 10. You don't even see.
Oh, you're talking about the hypersonic missile.
Exactly. It's not Mr. King Zhao. Mr. King Zhao is very fast, but Mr. Zircon is even faster. So it's going to be, our response is going to be Mr. Zircon with a nuclear warhead. Several Mr. Zircons with nuclear warhead. So there is World War III. We cannot even think about it, because this is really the unthinkable. But considering the level of the psychopaths
Hysteria.
who are in charge of the American system, we cannot discount it. We have come to a point where the Russians are very irrational actors. If we see what they have been standing for these past few years from the Americans, and especially these past 3 months where they're trying to have a dialogue at the highest level. Okay, let's sit down at the table and discuss serious issues. Missile proliferation, missiles in Eastern Europe, indivisibility of security, expansion of NATO, etc., INF treaty, etc. And the Americans, they keep stalling. So first of all, because they don't have anybody capable enough to like that. And second, because they don't want to discuss it. So it's the psychopathy is something beyond clinical. It's we never seen this in modern history. In fact, this is Stanley Kubrick's Doctor Strange.
It's kind of,
it's
it's frightening.
on a cosmic level. In fact, in terms
and the other thing too is, we know that public opinions have the ability to stop and start wars just by virtue of the power of people protesting or speaking out if the politicians want to get reelected, right? But we've seen all throughout COVID how much power they had over the narrative. We're now seeing this issue how much absent narrative, because they're flat censoring media now. Like, they're just defining journalists as good and bad. Before it was, oh, that's bad science. And they're calling scientists purveyors of bad science. And now they're flat out calling journalists bad purveyors of journalism. So and people are fine with that.
Yes, absolutely.
People are cool with that. So they have total control over the narrative, and people are just getting this, they're being bombarded with this stuff all the time, nonstop, every day with.
No, because
it's scary. That's what's scary.
It's scary because it's a very well coordinated process of mass zombification, and it didn't start with Don't forget that it didn't start with the beginning of Operation Z. It started many years before.
Started with COVID or before, yeah.
Exactly. It started before COVID, because the fact that only a single narrative is admitted on anything is, I would say, the number one feature of this great reset mentality. It's the only narrative accepted by the European Union and the European Commission, by the Davos gang, World Economic Forum, by all these people. And of course, by the Democrats, because the Democrats are one of the pendants, one of the cogs in the wheel of this whole system. So, and if you don't agree, it's simple. You're canceled. Now they managed to cancel. Oh, they managed to cancel? No. They think that they canceled a whole nation from the West.
Yeah.
It's not that you're canceling the president.
Even the dogs, you can't even find Russian dogs in dog shows anymore.
You remember when they canceled the president of the United States? Everybody, they say, well, they can even cancel the president of the United States. Big deal.
No.
Now they can cancel one of the top 10 nations on the planet, at least from Western public opinion. You know, it doesn't exist. Of course, obviously, if you look at my side of the world here, Eurasia, everything continues absolutely normal, and Russia continues to do business with everybody.
Well,
by the way, you know that they are selling 4 times more oil to India this year than compared to last year, for example. So everything is normal here. In
Yeah,
the
well,
West
not in
is
Europe.
another story. Yeah.
Not in Europe. I think there's a buffer over, as you get further away across the Atlantic, maybe there's a bit
Yes.
more of a buffer. There's a chance for energy independence in North America that Biden screwed up, by the way, to cater to his environmental buddies that were funded by US environmental buddies who were funded by billionaires who had interests that were in direct competition with the Keystone XL. So, I mean, now he can
Yes.
pick all that back up again because he has the perfect excuse, because it's Putin's bad, so he needs to do that now. And for us here in Europe, I mean, we are so tied to geographically to Russia, economically, politically. I mean, and to now just deny all that and
Completely
to say,
controlled,
well, now we're
Rachel.
just gonna
Exactly.
now
Yeah.
they're asking the average person to sacrifice so much for their interest. It's like, oh, you're gonna have to stop eating meat now. You probably can't
I
insure
know.
your
Stop
animals.
eating meat and stop eating
Yeah.
fish as well.
Yeah. Maybe you should just be eating other things. And because in France, we were told to reduce the temperature of our homes by a degree, which
Exactly.
I you know what, I can't really knock that, because I live
I
in an
know.
apartment in Paris where people all around me have the heat cranked all year, and I've never turned the heat on in my apartment. So it's like,
Yeah.
because they have so much convection coming into my apartment. So I mean, maybe that's not such a bad thing, but to tell people they need to do that, and it's because you must sacrifice. And for what? For your wars, for your
Yes,
conflicts,
yeah,
for
exactly.
your, and we're supposed to like take it hit after hit after hit for the greater good, and feel guilty about not doing that.
Absolutely. So
That's
Putin
what's
is
sick.
bad. He's the new Hitler, and you have to be on a fight with
Wow.
us. And for that, you have to renounce
Yeah.
everything that you do.
Right.
So you can
Right.
win the fight against the new Hitler. This
My
is their
favorite argument.
narrative. Yeah.
My favorite argument is, oh, well, you're complaining about not being able to turn the heat on. Well, at least you're not being bombed like the Ukrainians. Well, is that the high bar?
Yeah,
that's true.
I'm looking at a comment now. Yes, mass formation psychosis. Absolutely correct. But it works in Western culture because people in the West are, well, first of all, the corporate rat race. Second, the disappearing middle classes. So people are absolutely terrified of losing their jobs and how they're going to provide for their families if they lose their jobs, and then they are dead. Third, there's only one narrative, and the narrative is big tech, and big tech controls all narratives nowadays. Fourth, of course, the mainstream media. France is an excellent case, and Italy is even worse, where the main newspapers are controlled by fiat. All of them. It's completely absurd. So it's very, very similar to the US, but even more concentrated. Yeah. Here in Asia, Turkey, Iran, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, Russia, it's a completely different story because, well, I could go on talking about Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, etc. That's one element. That's
Do we have 20 more hours?
Can you give me another 21 hours?
We'll have to have you back.
Exactly. Russia, their experience of being invaded by the West, and in fact dealing with invasions and occupations throughout their history. Don't forget that they were occupied by the Mongols for almost 3 centuries. This is also in their collective unconscious. All of that. The fact that in 100 years, 200 years, they had to repel the Europeans twice, Napoleon and Hitler. And they know that the third time is probably the Americans. They know it's the Americans the third time. So they want to prevent that, and now they have the means to prevent that militarily, of course, and geoeconomically, if they play their cards right in terms of setting up a new monetary financial system, it's going to work. Why it's going to work? This is something that my friend Michael Hudson, the great professor Michael Hudson, I would say he's the best explainer in the world of what this is all about. It's about finance capitalism, which is virtual and it's basically a casino, and productive capitalism, which is what China and Russia do. And Russia, it's even more complex because they are the number one resource provider on the planet. They have everything. So they don't need anything from the West, literally. And on top of it, of having all the resources that you need, oil, gas, minerals, etc., They have an absolutely outstanding mathematical and physics knowledge. They have among the best mathematicians and physicists on the whole planet for ages. So really, they have everything that they. What they don't have, of course, is what the Chinese have: loads of money. But then you can always have an agreement, which is what they are doing. You're going to have Chinese productive investment in Russian natural resources everywhere, Russian companies everywhere. The Chinese are going to buy all. You don't want Nord Stream 2? Bye. We don't give a fuck. We're going to sell it to the Chinese, which is exactly what they're going to do. It's power of Siberia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You think that's what they're going to do?
No. It's not what I think, Rachel. It's already pre-planned by Gazprom. You know what they're doing? I'll give an example. Maybe some of you know.
But we're talking about a pipeline that goes from from Russia to Germany, right?
Yeah. No, this is very, very important. Nord Stream 2, I would say, for the foreseeable future, is frozen. This means many things. First thing, these bloody, stupid Germans are going to freeze next winter. And even one of their ministers said that yesterday. I don't remember.
Oh, no, they know they can't do without it.
Exactly. One of their ministers said that. I don't remember which one. I'm not sure if it was the Minister of Energy or Minister of... Well, one of their ministers said that, yes, if we don't have Russian gas, we're going to freeze next winter. Finally. Okay. That's number one. Number two, the German government is going to have to pay a fortune to the consortium that co-financed and was going to exploit Nord Stream 2, which includes German companies, Dutch companies, Shell, etc. This is going to be at least, the last numbers that we have, 20 billion euros. Fines. Number three, the Russians, they don't care because Gazprom, what they invested to build the pipeline, they already recovered the costs, everything. So Gazprom, in terms of Nord Stream 2, zero. We didn't lose any money. And now we're going to start to make more money because we keep delivering. Don't forget that they keep delivering gas to Europe according to those signed contracts. Where people
they're abiding by them.
People who are intelligent enough to do this, they are paying 300 instead of paying 2,000 in the spot market. Very, very few countries, but some of them did. Number four, what is Russia's plan B, which was already previewed to be plan A because they could not trust the Germans? Power of Siberia. So they have Power of Siberia 2 is already working. Power of Siberia 1, already working. And they are building an interconnector to Power of Siberia 2, which is also going to China. The thing about this interconnector is absolutely fascinating. If you flip a switch, you switch the direction where you're going to send your gas. So instead of pumping your gas to Nord Stream 2 in Europe, you pump your gas to Power of Siberia to China. And this thing is going to be ready in 2 years. They just signed... last month, they signed the final deal. So this thing is going to be ready in 2024. So with the flip of the switch, the Gazprom can sell all the gas the Chinese want through Power of Siberia 2. And don't forget that there are other customers who are salivating to get more Russian gas. Japan, Japan, South Korea, and India. So, for the Russians, absolutely no problem. Because they have all the resources. Oil, no problem. You don't want to buy our oil? We don't care. We can sell our oil relabeled, smuggled, in the black market, in floating tanks. No problem. If you pay us in gold or in rubles, all the oil that you want. And this is something that is going to start to happen soon. In the case of the Indians, the Indians are very, very clever. They are working with the Russians to establish a ruble-rupee mechanism. So they can pay for the Russian oil in their own currency, in rupees. How cool is that? And for the Russians, it's perfect because they transfer the rupees according to the official ruble-rupee exchange rate, bypass completely the US dollar. So all these things are moving here across Eurasia very, very fast. I would say as fast as the fact that we could never imagine that what they call over there rules-based international order, is collapsing. It's collapsing as fast as the new order is being organized by all these nations across Eurasia.
But you would think that the U.S. would have been a couple of steps ahead, figured that out, that they would have known that this would result if they did what they've just done, which is impose all these sanctions, etc.
Rachel, they're too dumb. Look at the intellectual level of the Democrat leadership. These people cannot run a bloody bratwurst stand in Berlin, or a high school in Florida. It's beyond comprehension.
But they run the State Department, so
stupid they are. And these people are running the United States government. Look, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something right now, straight away. At least I respected Mike, the Sopranos Pompeo. He was a bloody gangster.
Oh, he's lost a lot of weight.
But at least he was a competent gangster.
You knew exactly where he stood. Yeah.
Yes, you knew exactly where he stood, and he was a clever guy. He was not dumb like Blinken, Sullivan, Nuland, all these absolute nullities. No wonder. Can you imagine Sergei Lavrov in the same room with little Tony Blinken? Tony Blinken doesn't qualify not even to shine his shoes. You know who told me something absolutely great? I'm sure you know him, Rachel. Edward Luttwak.
No, I don't. How would I know him?
Edward Luttwak told me, I met him when he was young. He was a nice kid, little Blinken.
Oh, Tony Blinken. Yeah. No, but he went to school. He grew up in France here. He grew up in Paris.
He grew up in France. So,
and then went to college in US. So.
He's one of us. He's a baby boomer. But he's not very bright.
Yeah.
He's not James Baker.
I don't know.
No, he's not. No, I'm comparing with the previous generations. James Baker was brilliant.
Oh yeah, no.
He was also a gangster, but he was brilliant. You don't have these people now.
He's not Dick Cheney either. I mean,
he's not Dick Cheney, who was a bloody gangster, but very competent. So you have to give credit to these people at least. Now we're dealing with a bunch of amateur psychopaths, essentially. So no wonder we have reached the situation where we are the famous bulletin of atomic scientists clock. I think we are at 30 seconds to midnight.
Have they touched that clock recently? I'm always looking for that. I'm always looking for the guy who goes.
Last time I checked was 1 minute. Yeah.
Let me know when they get to 10 seconds. Take some action.
I think we are at 30 seconds because the serious possibility of a serious mistake involving a nuclear launch, now it's real. Because now it's more or less proven that they won't accept anything. The only thing that this current American system accepts is total Russian surrender. And they know it's not going to happen. And the Russians also know that the Americans want them to, total surrender. That so you have now you have the bear.
Do it.
The bear now. The bear is not even fighting. The bear woke up, had a very light breakfast, looked around, and it said, "Okay, let's start have some fun." Okay, Mr. Kinzhal, go over there and destroy that stupid NATO base in Western Ukraine. Poof. Oh, Mr. Zircon, there's something in Romania over there. You don't want to present your business card to those Romanians. This is what's going to happen. We are reaching this situation. So, the bear has been provoked, and now the bear is ready to fight. So you don't look. These people never read Bismarck, Rachel. Bismarck said, "Do anything, but don't provoke the Russians." This is Geopolitics 101. And that's exactly what they did. And now we are all hostages of this situation. All of us, the whole planet, we are hostages of this bunch of fucking psychos. And that's what when we work like us, we work right in the middle of the story. We despair. There are many reasons for us to despair. Unfortunately,
Unfortunately, yeah. And we're not out of the woods yet. But we're going on almost 2 hours now for a show that was supposed to be an hour long. I'm sure it's late there where you are in Istanbul. I'm
No,
sure
I'm
it's
gonna
getting,
go
it's like
for
9 p.m. at
dinner
night.
because otherwise everything closes here.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll let you go eat because we don't want you to be stuck with room service in
But
Istanbul.
let's
That would
do it.
be
Let's
great.
do it again soon, Rachel. I
Yeah,
love that, and
for
I love
sure.
answering questions. So let's do it again soon.
Yep.
All right.
I know that there's a lot of people logged on right now. I can see on my dashboard and on various platforms, and so many people are interested in asking questions. So we will definitely have you back on very soon, especially since this is evolving so quickly. So
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks
we're not out of
everybody.
the woods.
Yeah, and
Thank
stay strong, everybody.
you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye
And
bye.
see you next time, Pepe. Have a good evening. All right, everyone. Is it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for sending all of your questions to me and Pepe. We are going to have them back absolutely in the next couple of weeks for another round because there's just so much to talk about right now, and it's important to get this out there. Tomorrow night, to get another side of the story on another issue, we're going to have a former CIA officer who served on the ground in Iraq and find out what is going on over there, because I think you heard about a missile strike in Iraq recently. Iran claimed responsibility. We might not agree too much on his point of view with respect to what he's going to say on the air, but I'm never one to really prejudge that much. So we're just going to get into it. And so that's tomorrow night. And then Thursday night, we're going to have a former diplomat on the show to talk about everything that's going on from a diplomatic standpoint between Russia, Ukraine, the US, NATO, etc. So that's coming up. Live shows at exactly the same time tomorrow night. So Tuesday night, Thursday night. And if you want any details on the show, if you want to read some of my work that I've done recently on this issue and others, you can go to rachelmarsden.com. And you can also find a link right at the top of the page to all of the platforms on which you can view this show. I know that a lot of people seem to be watching on YouTube right now and Twitter and Facebook Live, but there are others as well. We're pretty much everywhere. And if you want to review the shows, you can find them right where you happen to be watching them right now. Again, thank you so much, everybody. And it's been great having you with us. And let's keep building this community. And if you have any suggestions for any guests, send me some information as to guest suggestions at unredactedshow@gmail.com. And that is it for now. And wishing you all a good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. Take care.